there's a moment most people never talk about. Not the breakdown, not the rock bottom. Everyone talks about that part, the crash, the crisis, the thing that brought them to their knees. That part has a story, it has a shape. People know how to describe it. I mean, the moment after, when the smoke clears, when the noise stops, when you're standing in what used to be your life. And something very quiet, very honest inside you says, I don't want to rebuild this. Not the way it was. Not back to that. That moment is one of the most disorienting things a person can experience, because everything around you is waiting for you to return to normal. Your routines are waiting. The people around you are waiting. The version of yourself that everyone knows. That version is standing at the door with the lights on, expecting you back. And you're standing in the rubble thinking, I'm not sure I want normal anymore. That's terrifying. I won't pretend it isn't. But here is what I also know. And this is the thing this podcast exists to tell you. That moment, as frightening as it is the most alive you will ever feel. Because it means something in you has finally stopped pretending. And something true is trying to come through. Welcome to Bodi Alchemy, the Phoenix Effect. I'm Nova. And this show exists because transformation is one of the most misunderstood things we go through as human beings. We're sold a version of it that's clean and linear and photogenic. Before, after, new you, 10 steps. But the real version, the version that actually changes you at the root, doesn't look like that. It's slower. It's stranger. It costs things you didn't expect to lose. And it gives you things you didn't know you were missing. That's what we're going to talk about every episode, honestly, without the performance. Today is episode 3. And we're starting at the very beginning with the question I think matters more than any other when it comes to transformation. What did the phoenix actually burn? Stay with me. Here is the version of the phoenix story most people know. The bird catches fire. It burns completely. And from the ash, it rises. New, powerful, reborn. It's one of the oldest symbols of transformation in human history. You find it in ancient Egypt, in Greek mythology, in Chinese and Persian and Japanese traditions. The image transcends culture because it speaks to something universal. The idea that destruction and rebirth are not opposites. They're the same process. Beautiful, powerful, absolutely on 1,000 motivational posters. But here's the detail the poster version leaves out. In the original mythology, the phoenix doesn't burn because something external destroys it. It isn't struck by lightning. It isn't hunted. The phoenix builds its own funeral pyre. It gathers the wood. It arranges it. And then it chooses to enter the fire. Read that again. The phoenix chooses to enter the fire. That changes everything. Because if the fire comes from outside, that's crisis. That's the thing that happens to you. The job loss, the health scare, the relationship that finally ends. The moment you catch your reflection and don't recognize who's looking back. Those are real fires. They happen to real people, and they can absolutely be the beginning of transformation. But the Phoenix myth is talking about something else. It's talking about the fire you choose, the decision made quietly, privately, in the part of you that is done waiting, to stop being who you were and begin becoming who you are. That decision doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with fanfare. It usually sounds like a very small, very tired voice saying enough, not in anger, in clarity. That voice is the beginning of the pyre. Now here's the question we never ask. What exactly did the phoenix burn? We see the ash. We celebrate the rising. But what was actually in that fire? I think about this a lot. And I think the honest answer, is this. The phoenix burned everything that was no longer true, not everything that was bad, not everything that was broken, everything that was no longer true. The identity it had been performing for other people, the version of itself shaped by fear, by approval, by every old message about what a person is supposed to look like or feel like or want, the habits it had inherited rather than chosen, the relationships it had maintained out of obligation rather than love, the self-image built on comparison rather than reality. Some of those things were never true. Some of them were true once, genuinely, and then quietly stopped being true while life kept moving. Both of those go into the fire. And here's the hard part. Some of what burns was actually valuable. Some of it was protective. Some of it was armor that made complete sense, that you built deliberately, piece by piece, because you needed it. And now it has to burn too. Let me talk about the armor. When we go through something painful, and everyone does in different ways and different doses, we adapt. We learn behaviors that protect us. We develop ways of being in the world that keep us from getting hurt in the same way again. The person who stopped being vulnerable after being badly hurt, that was smart. That was survival. The person who became fiercely self-reliant because depending on others had always led to disappointment, that made complete sense. The person who kept themselves busy, productive, always moving, because stillness felt dangerous, because stillness let the feelings in. There was a logic to that. There was wisdom in it once. We call this armor, and it works. For a while, it genuinely works, but armor is heavy, and armor doesn't discriminate. It protects you from pain, but it also protects you from the things that require you to be open, from depth, from connection, from the parts of life that can only reach you if you let them. There's a concept in psychology called psychological rigidity. It describes what happens when the coping mechanisms that helped you survive a difficult chapter become the exact things that trap you in the next one. The armor hardens. And now it isn't just keeping out danger, it's keeping out growth. It's keeping out the life that is trying to reach you. And here is what makes this so difficult to see. The armor becomes invisible. You stop experiencing it as protection. You start experiencing it as personality. I'm just not someone who asks for help. I just don't really care what I look like. I just prefer to keep things casual. I'm just not emotional. But often, not always, but often, underneath those statements is an old wound that made it safer to not care. An old moment where caring cost too much. The armor made sense then. It may not anymore. Real transformation, Phoenix level transformation, requires you to look at your armor and ask a very honest question. What was I protecting against? Is that threat still real? Does this armor still serve the life I'm trying to build? And sometimes the answer is yes. Some armor stays. Some boundaries are healthy and permanent and should be. Not everything that looks like a wall is a prison. Some walls are foundations. But a lot of what we carry, a lot of the weight most people walk around with every single day and is outdated. It's protection against a version of our life that no longer exists. We are still guarding a door to a house we don't live in anymore. And putting that down, choosing to put it down, deliberately, even though it's frightening, that is what goes into the fire. That is what the phoenix burns. I want to talk about the body for a moment, because I think this is where transformation gets most misunderstood. We tend to talk about personal growth as a mental process, a mindset shift, a new perspective, and mindset matters enormously. I won't diminish that. But there is a dimension of transformation that lives entirely in the body. And if you ignore it, the change won't last. There is a phrase from trauma research that I think is one of the most important things anyone can say about human psychology. The body keeps score. It comes from the work of Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, a psychiatrist and researcher who spent decades studying how emotional and psychological experiences are stored, not just in the mind, but in the nervous system, in the muscles, in the breath, in how we hold ourselves, in whether we feel safe inside our own skin. What this means practically is that stress, sustained chronic stress, changes the body, not just the mind, the body. When you live for a long time in a life that doesn't fit, performing an identity that isn't yours, carrying armor that has become part of your skeleton, running on adrenaline and obligation and the constant low hum of not enoughness, your nervous system adapts to that state. It begins to treat stress as normal. Stillness starts to feel wrong. Rest starts to feel dangerous. Your body forgets what it feels like to simply be at ease. And this shows up in ways that feel purely physical. The exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. The tension that lives in your shoulders, your jaw, your chest. The feeling of being disconnected from your body. Like you're piloting it from a distance rather than living inside it. The sense that your reflection belongs to someone you used to know. These are not small things. These are the body's way of telling you that the gap between who you are and who you're performing has become unsustainable. And here is the truth that the wellness industry rarely says clearly enough. You cannot think your way out of a body that is holding your history. You have to work with it, gently, consistently, over time. That means sleep, real sleep, not the 6 hours you've convinced yourself is enough. It means movement that feels like care rather than punishment. It means looking at the physical things you've been putting off, ignoring, or numbing, and beginning slowly to address them. Not because your body is a project to be optimized, but because it is the home of the person you are becoming, and it deserves to feel like one. So let's come back to the question we started with. What did the phoenix actually burn? The performed identity, the outdated armor, the habits inherited rather than chosen, the tension stored in the body that no longer needs to be there, the story about who you are that was written by fear rather than truth, all of it into the fire. And what rises from that ash is not a new person. That's the part the myth gets slightly wrong, I think. You don't become someone unrecognizable. You become more recognizably yourself, clearer, less defended, more aligned between what you feel inside and how you move through the world. The phoenix doesn't rise as a stranger. It rises as the truest version of what it always was, finally free of everything that was covering it. That is what this podcast is about, not perfection, not a better before and after, the truest version of you, the one that exists underneath the performance, underneath the armor, underneath everything you picked up along the way that was never really yours. And I believe, with everything I have, that this process is available to anyone, any age, any starting point, any body, any history. The only requirement is the willingness to ask the question honestly. Does this still serve who I'm becoming? Because the phoenix didn't have to earn the right to rise. It just had to be willing to burn. And so do you. BodiModi exists because of everything I just said. It began with a recognition. People are doing this work every single day, quietly, without applause. People are in the process of becoming. They're evolving. They're changing. They're trying to close the gap between the life they're living and the life that actually fits. And the tools available to support that journey, the products, the rituals, the things that help you feel at home in your body while you're in the middle of becoming someone new, they weren't built for that person. They were built to fix, to correct, to make you more acceptable by someone else's standard. BodiModi was built from a different starting point. Every product lives inside one of 4 pillars: transform, enhance, protect, evolve. Because this journey is not one-dimensional. It's physical and emotional and practical and deeply personal all at once. And it belongs to everybody. That is not a tagline. That is the actual belief the brand was built on. Transformation does not have a gender. It does not have an age. It does not have a required starting point or a correct appearance. It belongs to anyone who is ready to begin. The link is in the show notes. Come as you are. That's episode 3 of Bodi Alchemy, the Phoenix Effect. Next episode, we go into the body specifically. What happens physically when you've been running on stress and survival for too long, and what it actually takes to begin repairing that. Not a detox, not a cleanse. Something more fundamental and more lasting. If this episode landed for you, share it. Not to grow a number, because there is someone in your life right now who needs to hear that they are not broken. They are not behind. They are not failing. They are in the process. And the process is the point. Leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts if you're listening there. It takes 30 seconds and it means more than you know for a new show. Find us at BodiModi.com. Follow along on Instagram and TikTok. I'm Nova. And I'll see you next week. Embrace your evolution.